Welcome to GDB World. In today's video, we will take a look at how we can create a procedural stylized water material in SubstanceDesigner. If you enjoy the video and wish to support the channel, please leave a like, subscribe, and with that, let's jump straight into the video. The graph itself is made up of two main elements, the water depths and the surface water detail, along with some shape refinement to make it more wispy. To start us out, we'll be looking at the water depths. First we create a PBR metallic roughness 4K graph, and then we just start plugging in our blend node into our base color and height. Then we can move into creating our own cells material using the splitter circular node. The reason we want to do it this way is just it gives us a bit more control with how the shape looks. Don't need to, depending on how much variation and sort of power to the users you want to give them. So it's just nice and simple, just disc shape, stretch it out, randomize it a little bit. Doesn't really matter because you're going to be making quite a few tweaks to this after you've put the rest of the values in anyway. Just mix it up, make sure you have that luminosity random put in there as well. And then we can pump this into our histogram scan to create a mask, and then a distance node, and you'll see that then creates our cells texture that we're looking for. Then we're just pushing this through edge text. We're going to create two of these. One's going to be used for the depths texture, and then one's going to be used for the surface shape as well. Then we push this into a flood fill node, and then into a random grayscale. Now I wasn't too happy with how random it was, so I just duplicated it, gave it a random seed, and then I'm blending those two together. And then we just push it into a warp node, and then push it into a blend node just so that we can see it in the graph itself. And then we can put our Perlin noise into the warp node. Decrease the scale of this so then it's a little bit bigger, so the warping's more focusing on bigger shapes rather than small tiny shapes. Doesn't matter too much because in the end we're going to be blurring this shape quite heavily. What I'm doing here is we're just putting it into a bevel node just to give a bit more height to the graph. Then we can blend this with the original shape with a max lighten. We're doing a slope blur grayscale this time using the same Perlin noise, and we're just going to increase the samples to max and decrease intensity so it's quite small, so 0.05 is enough for me. We'll leave it on blur, and then we're going to use the levels node just to adjust the values a little bit and just wipe out some of those lighter values. And we use the transform 2D. What we're doing here is just to add a little bit more randomness to the overall color. So we blend these two together, it makes it a bit more blotchy. And then we're doing a quantized node, similar to what we did above. This just gives us some more height values to sort of work with, makes it a bit more rocky almost. And then we put this into a safe transform. This will be purely used for control purposes, but it does allow us to then change it back to 16 bits so that we don't lose the quality of the texture. Now we can move on to the surface details, and we're just adding in a bevel. This will be purely for control purposes as well, in case we want to sort of soften some of the details. Then we put in our warp node. It's a directional warp for this one, and we're just reusing that Perlin noise, bump the intensity up to like 23 or something, and then just angle it. Then we're using the bevel node. This time we're actually going to use it. We'll just put it to 0.01, leave it on round, and then we're going to invert the shape so that we're left with just the lines itself. Then we can move into using the blur node. We use this one more frequently just because we're not too worried about retaining edges so much. We just sort of want to make it as liquidy as possible, and the default blur does a pretty good job of giving you that sort of melted look rather than a blurred look. We'll then use a flood fill again, and we'll just put a random grayscale assigned to it. This one, you have to be careful with this when you're blending it in. We want to just have it quite light, because it's just going to reduce the values in different corners of the texture very lightly. If you have it too strong, then you can be left with lines. We just make another copy of this shape and blend in a purlin noise. And then we can blend those two together. So we start with the normal blurred shape, and then we move into blending in our random grayscale shape, and then finally the purlin noise shape. And that should give you some good shapes to sort of play with, to sort of tweak to get to your liking. Then we're just doing another blur. This one's quite heavy compared to the previous one, so 3.45 is what I've gone with. Then we can put in an auto levels node, and then we're going to do another directional warp with a Gaussian noise instead. And we just decrease that scale down and give us a bit of a random seed to randomize it a little bit. This is essentially the warp that does the most heavy lifting, so it really turns it quite liquidy depending on how much you warp it by. So we generally want that quite high and to give it an angle. Then we just put in our gradient maps. This is going to be tweaked later, but we want to accompany that with an HSL node as well, so we can play with the saturation and alter its color easier. And then we can come back and tweak all the different nodes to get it roughly more what we're sort of looking for. So we'll go back to even the original base shape, change that random seed a little bit, and this way we can sort of see it change real time until we get something that we're more closer to what our brief is. And finally we can move on to creating our wispy sort of addition to the surface lines. So this is done with a distance node as well, and we're just going to use the original inverted grayscale as like the mask, and then as the source input we're going to use the original bevel shape as well. Play with that maximum distance a little bit, change it to 1.5, and same as the other shapes, we want to blur it a bit. And then we're going to create a mask of histogram scan. Blur that mask a little bit so it's not super strong, because we're actually going to use that mask to clip out some of the existing shape. Then we're going to put this mask into the opacity part of the blend node when we come to merge it in. And we merge those two shapes together with a min darken. We can increase and decrease the intensity of it based on our preference, but essentially it gives us that nice sort of wispy effect that we're sort of looking for. And with that brings today's video to a close. You can go ahead and expose all the different hue values or shape parameters that you have in your graph. For the height side of things, I've just sort of gone for a slightly blended or changed purlin noise for the most part. Since it's stylized, it doesn't really matter too much, doesn't have to be super accurate. You know, water's going to be pretty unpredictable anyway. And with that, thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a lovely day.